Hello everyone and welcome to my video blog on how to set up your hardware and software for forensic video processing. I am Emi Polito. I am a certified forensic video analyst and I've been in this industry for approximately 10 years now, working for both the public sector and the private sector. And before that, I was an operator and video editor for a broadcaster, a television channel based in London, in the United Kingdom. So here we are. Um, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned during my time, both in terms of how I do things and the tools that I use, the kit that I use with you, because I feel is important to share knowledge and experiences with you guys, with other professionals working in the industry, wherever you are in the world, as much as possible to standardize procedures and ensure they are the best that they can be, especially in view of, for example, the accreditation. If you are in the United Kingdom, we're all going through accreditation, the ISO 17025, which is becoming now a reality in the United Kingdom, and therefore, like I said, I think it's important that we share as much as we can the experiences and the things that we have learned to make the profession as as forensically sound as it can be. So here we are, and at the same time, obviously, I'd like to hear from you as well on how you might do things differently to the way I do, because it's not a proven and exact science. It's it's always developing, and there are always perhaps better ways to do things. So by all means, if you do things differently, and if you got other ideas or better ideas, please get in touch with me, and I'm going to leave my contact details in the description, where you can certainly contact me anytime. I'd like very much to hear from you. So let's talk a little bit about the kit that you're gonna need doing this job. And contrary to popular belief, you don't need a super beast of a machine to do forensic video processing. So I do all my work on a laptop now, and I'm gonna show you my system specs. And what I have is a Windows 11 machine, because I've bought it recently, and they all tend to come with newer operating systems. And we are going to see that if you're concerned about using perhaps old players, or old applications, old, especially when it comes to CCTV, that you may feel that they might not work on newer operating systems, don't worry too much about that, because we can use virtual machines, and I'm going to show you a bit later on how that works. So I went for a Windows 11 home system. It is an Intel processor, an i7 Intel processor, so it's multi-threaded. As you can see here, is not the fastest processor in the world. It's 2.30 gigahertz. If you're into gaming, you'll know that you'll need a lot more than that. But I find that for the work that I do, it's more than enough, really. What I went for, though, I went for as much RAM as I could afford. And you're gonna see that when you do forensic video processing, especially with the video that is in high definition or even 4K this day, you're gonna get CCTV, of that sort of resolution. Then you're gonna need quite a lot of RAM, and I would suggest 8 gigabytes as minimum, but buy as much as you can afford. I went for 16. If you're using a 64-bit operating system and you got a 64-bit compatible processor, which is what you should go for these days, then you can go above, I think the limit for a 32-bit machine is 4 gigabytes of memory, and that's a bit low, really. So you want a 64-bit system and go for as much RAM as you can get. In terms of graphic card, you do not need a beast of graphic card to do video processing. What I would suggest, though, is that you get a graphic card that is separate from the motherboard. So don't go for like the integrated chipset, video chipset. If you can, go for a separate graphic card. I went for a separate card, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 card you can see here, which is a mid to high-end card, shall we say. Um, you certainly don't need a gaming card like a 3070, for example, or 3080. They are very expensive cards, and unless you do complex video editing with a lot of a lot of layers and a lot of effects and things like that, then you're gonna be fine with a graphic card like that or an equivalent of that. In terms of hard drive, so I've got a 500 gigabytes SSD drive, which is a solid state drive, so it's not a drive that spins anymore like the old days. Definitely suggest that for your system. You don't need like a massive size SSD drive for your system, but obviously you might need a lot of storage space if you're planning to obviously work with with video and CCTV, especially when you go and process it. And I use external drives mainly, external USB drives for that, which I obviously encrypt. And we are going to talk now about encryption because it is very important that you protect your work as much as possible when you, especially if you work in law enforcement or if you work for enforcement, and therefore you are commissioned by police forces to do work, and potentially you work with a lot of sensitive data. Therefore, you want to encrypt it and secure it as much as you can, just in case, obviously, in the unluckily unfortunate event that you misplace your system, or um, you you get it stolen. Then it's you want to make sure that no one else can see that data apart from you. So I use VeroCrypt. Again, this is free. Everything is free, and I'm going to give you links for everything. And the way VeroCrypt works is gives you a list of available drive letters when you can mount an encrypted partition. The first time you use it, obviously, you have to create that partition. I've already created it in my case. And then what you do, you select your encrypted partition, which I've got on my document drive. So I have got an encrypted partition for my reports that I get commissioned to do, and then I've got one for the National Crime Agency, which is an agency in the United Kingdom that has got details of your casework that they will then forward to on request to police investigator and officers only around the country, to obviously give them an idea of your areas of expertise. So I am going to mount it's my EPCFEA encryption where I keep all my reports, and I'm going to mount it on drive W. I can mount anywhere I like, but I'm going to go for mount W. When you mount it, you put in your password. And then once that's decrypted, and then you will obviously be able to see the content of that encrypted partition on your Windows Explorer, which is right there, drive W. And in there, you can see I have got all my secret stuff. So my imagery analysis reports, my CMS, the crime management system, where I keep all my submissions and therefore potentially addresses and names of victims, of suspects, of witnesses. And then, I've got my recovery information, my password for my accounts, for my online accounts, backup codes for recovery of those, all stuff that I don't want anyone to see apart from myself. So I keep that protected. And there are other ways where you can encrypt your data. Obviously, you can go for an overall encryption structure, such as BitLocker, for example, that will encrypt all of your hard drive. I opted for a more selective encryption because I don't need other stuff, such as my website data, for example. I don't need that encrypted, and therefore I don't need to go through the hassle of encrypting now. So it's completely up to you. So let's talk about the transferring of files, for example, from a disk, an optical disk, or a USB device, which might be police evidence. Uh, so it might be in an evidence bag, or in any case, it might be an exhibit. And now, especially with with the accreditation, but also taking into account that our discipline is some sort of is a digital forensic discipline as such, we want to make sure that we can prove at a later stage, if necessary, that anything that we copy from an exhibit, such as a disk or a USB exhibit or USB drive exhibit, to our workstation, to our machine, is exactly the same. So that the copy that you've produced is exactly the same as that of the original, because you don't want to work from the original. You want to work from a digital clone of the original that lives in your machine. Okay. So what I use for that is a little tool called Fast Copy. And again, there are many out there, but I am going to give you what I use, and by all means, it's not the law. You might use other tools, but I use this one. And what this one does two things at the same time, which is why I like it so much. You copy the files from your exhibit to your wherever you want to go to, just as you would do in Windows Explorer, for example. But at the same time, it creates a hash value of the clone, and it does a quick check that the hash value is the same as the original. So the hash value is a digital signature, is an algorithm which basically proves, if matched with the original, if they are the same, it proves that statistically they are the same. It's impossible mathematically to say that they are exactly the same, because of the limitation of the algorithm characters, but it gives you a very good indication that they are the same. So for example, if I go and copy one of my files, I'm gonna pick one that is hopefully not too big. This one is 152 megs. That would be all right. I'll just drop it in there, and then I tell it where I want it. So say I want to copy into my desktop, and then I'm going to execute that. So that is going to copy the file, as you can see, is now appeared on my desktop, but at the same time, it's going to give me a quick check that there are no errors in the copy, which is also useful, but also is gonna give me a verified hash value, which is here, the MD5 of that file. And because I've got verify option ticked, it also means that the tool has already checked that the hash value of the copied file is the same as the hash value of the original file. So a very good tool, but there are others out there, such as MD5 Checksummer, and Quick Hash. There are a few of them. They're all free. I just use this one because, like I said, it does two things for me at the same time. It copies and it hashes at the same time. So I like it a lot. Let's now talk about the way you do your work. So, and what I mean by that is, if you have worked in forensic video processing for a while, you'll know that eventually, as you start to install video codecs or dubious software that you don't know nothing about in your machine, because you want to be able to play that particular piece of proprietary CCTV, for example, then you're going to in the long term, you're going to come across a lot of conflicts and potentially issues that will affect the integrity of your Windows system. So for that reason, I use a virtual system. So a virtual system is basically a machine living on your real machine. It's obviously a not real, so that's why it's called virtual, but it acts and operates exactly like a real machine. And when you create it, you would go through the same processes as you would to create a real machine. So you would have to install Windows, you will possibly have to license Windows as well into it. You will have to install all your tools, your drivers, etc., etc. But once you have it set up as you like, fresh and clean of any conflicts, ideally deprives of any dodgy codecs that you might know of that might screw up your machine, then you can make that as a template, and then that template you can then uh, copy over onto somewhere else on your machine, and then work from the copy of your virtual machine, and then you can do everything that you like in terms of breaking it, testing it, debugging it, screw it all up, because you know that you've got like a fresh template of your virtual machine that you can use from scratch, and it's very quick, very quick to load. Um, you might also opt the way of going for a bootable drive image of your overall system, and that's entirely entirely acceptable as a practice. But I go for the virtual machine, also because give me the options of using a different operating system than Windows 11, for example. Um, and also because if we are working a team of say 5 or 10 people, for example, then that will ensure that everyone will use the same software, the same version of the software living in the virtual machine, the same presets, and therefore standardize the work as much as possible. So I am going to now launch it and show you how that works. So what I've done here, I've got a shortcut on my desktop which links to a very quick command prompt script. And again, don't worry too much about the technicalities of this, because I will then hopefully, do separate video blogs talking about each of these tools that I'm going to talk to you about in detail. But for now, I'll just tell you that what I have is a template of my virtual machine, which is fresh and clean, copying over to a temporary location, and then the script will also, once that's done, will tell the system to load the virtual machine using the software, the dedicated software tool that will open it, and then that machine will then be copied, and then it will then boot up. And then I will work on that virtual machine as if it was the real machine. So there are two main sort of manufacturer of virtual machines as such that I know of. One is called VMware, and the other one is called Oracle VirtualBox. So I've used both, and I found that the VMware version suits my needs better. But it doesn't mean that you can't go for the other one. You can try it and see how you get on with it. So as you can see here, my virtual machine is booting up. Now he has copied, and you can see is a Windows 7 system. You can see is Windows 7 is booting up in the virtual machine, and when that's loaded, that will be a machine living in your machine, in your real machine. And you can see here, so it's a Windows 7 system, fully licensed, and I've used a license of my old computer to license the Windows operating system in the virtual machine. And here I've got all the tools that I use for my forensic video processing, and I can do anything I like to this machine. I can break it, I can test, I can install dodgy or dubious drivers and software that I need to maybe play that problematic piece of CCTV footage, because I know that once I'm done and I shut this down, when I then reboot it by using my little script here, which copies a fresh template into a temporary location, then that will go back to a clean state. And so let's have a look at what I use for interrogation of my media. So interrogation is important, because it gives you an idea of whether a file is a media file to start with, because you might not know that for sure. But it also will give you some very useful information about that media file. That information is called metadata, which is effectively data about data, and is information such as the time and date of the recording, perhaps at times you can get that from the metadata. The type of video codec that uses, the resolution, the frame rate, whether it's progressive or interlaced, all that sort of really useful information that you will need to do your processing, or especially if you're doing analysis, I would say. And by the way, I forgot to say that if you obviously want to copy files from your real machine to your virtual machine, all that you have to do is open an Explorer window on the real machine. And for example, the 264 that we copied on a laptop before, we're using fast copy. I now right click on that copy, and then I click on the virtual machine and click paste, and that is going to copy the file from the real machine onto the virtual machine. So now that I've got my 264 file there, I can then drag that onto my media info. And again, there are different and many interrogation tools. There's Gspot, which is very popular. There's ExifView. There's FFprobe. It's completely up to you. I use media info because that's what I'm used to. But there's nothing to stop you to use others if you feel that's more comfortable for you, shall we say. So, and you can see in this example, I have got a general tab which will give me information about the file name, the file size, but you can see I've got a video tab which indicates to me that this file has got a video stream, therefore is a video file. If it did have audio, you would most likely see an audio tab as well, which again, before even viewing it or listening to it, you will know that the file has got potentially sound on it. So that will obviously dictate on how you will deal with that later on down the line. Here, for example, you can see that this particular file uses an AVC codec. He's got a GOP size, and I'm not going to go too much into the technicalities of that, what that means, but he also tells you, I will do that perhaps a later video blog because that's a topic of its own. It will give you the size of the GOP. It will give you the resolution of the file, which is actually, as I can see here, is quite good resolution. So potentially things will go in my head. I can make announcements on this making advantage of the good resolution of the file. It will give you the aspect ratio, the color space that it's using, so whether it's a UV luminance or whether it uses RGB, the three primary colors, the subsampling of the color space, the bit depth, and the scan as well. So this will not tell you all the time, but if it does, then you got an indication that perhaps you don't have to worry about the interlacing, or if it says interlaced, then you might have to deal with that as well. So there you go. And then the beauty of this is that it will also create a report for you. So if I click export and save the report in HTML file, stick that on the desktop on my virtual machine, and then call it 264 media info, save that, and that will come out as an HTML report, which can keep in my notes, which is great for ISO. So there you go. So in terms of transcoding the file or converting the file into a viewable format, and that really is the key of the old video processing procedure, because what we want is the aim of all this, as you know, is converting with the best quality as we possibly can a video file that is potentially proprietary, and therefore is not viewable in its raw state, converting it in a format that is viewable for court, that will then be playable in Windows Media Player on VLC, which is what most lawyers and barristers use. And at the same time, obviously, it prepares the footage for video editing, for example. So if you want to put different clips from different sources together, you first have to transcode them into a viewable format, or into a compatible format, shall we say, to your favorite video editing platform, so that you can edit all these clips together. So for that, I use FFmpeg. FFmpeg is another open source application. It is a very powerful video player and transcoding engine. Um, it is very good with H.264 formats. There are many caveats of H.264 formats out there. It will recognize them all on the main, or most of all, and it will give you the ability of rewrapping them or transcoding them into a different format. Uh, and the way it works, the free version of it is basically a bunch of exe files that you can open or you can use by using a command prompt. And the command prompt is 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 the way, if you are similar age to me, you will have used computers in the 80s, in the 90s, when you wanted to tell the computer what to do. You'll have to type it down. These days, we use GUIs, which stand for graphic user interface. And with those, you have buttons, menus, drop-down boxes, and you activate those by using your mouse. But in the old days, we used to use command prompt, and the free version of FFmpeg comes that. You have to use a command prompt to use it, but there are other tools out there, which are actually quite cheap. I'm not aware of any freeware one as such, but there are other GUIs out there for FFmpeg that you can use. I use a little one called WinFF, which is very easy to use, and very simple and very effective. And therefore, I use those two together. So with FFmpeg, and again, I'm not going to go through all the technicalities of it, but I will probably run a separate video blog for how you're using FFmpeg in a command prompt state, because you might then find a lot of code snippets that you might not be available in the GUI, and therefore you'll have a lot more control of it. But for this instance, we're going to play that 264 that we used before. So I have a little command for that on my command prompt, and there you go. You have your footage playing. And now that I know that it plays in FFmpeg, I can think about transcoding it or converting it. So I can use that with the command prompt, but I'm going to use WinFF. So I'll do the same thing. I'll drag my file over there. And then, as you can see, another benefit of the virtual machine is that I've got all my presets already there for transcoding or rewrapping. And for transcoding, I use a lossless codec called UT Video, which I find is very good. It's lossless, therefore it doesn't deteriorate the visual quality, but it gives you a transcoded file size, which is still considerable, but that is lower than it would be if you would transcode that to an uncompressed format. So it is quite good. And then once you got that codec installed in your machine, then you can then transcode everything that you need with FFmpeg or with other tools using that particular codec. And that is also compatible with editing programs such as Premiere Pro, for example, as long as obviously the machine where you're using Premiere Pro from has got that UT video codec installed in it. I say this because I know there are some agencies which use two different systems for transcoding and for editing, and therefore you have to make sure that that codec is present on both. For me, I use the same machine, so I don't have to worry about that. So I've created a different preset for my transcoding. I'm going to transcode it with UT video using raw resolution, but I am just going to transcode 10 seconds of this, and I am going to put it into I'm going to tell him to put it into the same location as where the original is, which in this instance is the desktop. Therefore, I'm going to convert. It just gives me a brief summary of the code that FFmpeg is using that you would have otherwise put into a command prompt. And then I am going to run it. So you see the FFmpeg window comes up again. And now I have got my transcoded file on the desktop. And also one other reason why I like the virtual machine is because I set it up so that when I do a transcode, it automatically does a report for me, a transcript report. I have got a shortcuts on my desktop where my reports are. And here you can see the transcode I've just did is all there with the code that I used, the codec that I used is there. And also it tells me that I've only transcoded 10 seconds of it. Everything is there, including all the transcode text messages, if you like. There's a lot of gibberish, but it will just show at a later stage, perhaps, that you've done your job by making everything you do auditable, reproducible, and retraceable, which is the key, of forensic science or of any science, in fact, especially with accreditation coming up. So you have done your job as best as you could. Another tool that I use is Virtual Dub. It's free, open source. And what Virtual Dub is, a graphic user interface. It's got its own FFmpeg engine built into it. Although at times I find that before I can use, I have to do a little transcode or rewrap on FFmpeg. But a lot of times you can load raw footage straight into it, and then use other engines as well, like a DirectX, for example. So if you've got proprietary codecs, like for example a GeoVision codec, you then install that into your virtual machine. And then using DirectX and Virtual Dub, you can open that. So the way it works is you open your video file, and again you can choose the video engine that you want to use. For the main, I use FFmpeg. Sometimes I use others, very very seldomly. On the main, I use FFmpeg. And then you tell it where your file lives. So I go into my desktop. I'm going to load up my transcoded version just to show you how it works. When you first open up, the file will open in its raw resolution. And as we know from media info, in this instance, we know that the resolution is very high and is higher than the display resolution of my laptop. Therefore, it's not going to show me all of it. But it's good because a lot of players, when you open a video file, you automatically resize resolution so that you can see it all to start with. But I'm more interested to see how it looks at 100% view size, which is exactly what I'm seeing here. But obviously, you can shrink that down to a size where you can see everything. And Virtual Dub has basically got on the right side, it's got your input pane, so that is your raw footage, and then on the left side, it's got the output pane, which is the equivalent footage at that particular frame after you applied filters. Now, Virtual Dub has got a number of filters, very useful filters. The one I use the most are the resize filter, and you can also choose the interpolation method that you use. And then it's got timestamp. You can add a timestamp if you like. If you have transcoded a bit of proprietary footage, and then you find that the timestamp is not embedded into the footage, is not written as pixel data on the footage as such. In this instance, it is, but a lot of times it isn't. Then you can add your own timestamp, and you can get that information from the player, or perhaps from the file name. Like for example, in this case, that information about the time is already on the file name. So I can see here is it 2020, is June, is the 12th, it starts at 1847 and it finishes at 1804 or 5. Now in this instance, obviously the timestamp is already there, but if it isn't, then you can use that information to add it with a filter. Then you can use you can adjust the levels, for example, or resize it. There's loads of, you can deinterlace here. There are a lot of little filters that you can use. So for example, if I were to change the levels on this one, I can get a preview as well. I can make it a little bit brighter. And then I can click OK. So my filters will now be in there. So now you can see the difference between the input and the output. And then you can transcode the whole thing, or you can transcode a portion of it. But contrary to FFmpeg, now you can see exactly what you are, what you are marking as such. So, and it will give you a and mark region as well. And then you can choose your compression style as you wanted to export it. And as long as the code that you want to use is stored on your virtual system or on your real system, if you're using a real machine, then it will come up there. So I'm going to use the UT video because that's the one I know that is lossless and that will be compatible to my Premiere Pro. So once I've done that, I can go ahead and save that. And I am going to just call it the same as the original with a VD and put it onto my desktop. So it's going to do that very quick, very effective. And also I can save my processing settings. So all the processing I've done, again, is recorded. And if I put that into my desktop, now, not only have I got my transcoded file, but I've also got a little report of the processing that I've done in Virtual DAB. And again, for ISO 17025, you want to make sure you do that. But I would say in general, you wanted to make sure you do that because it is a good way of working in a criminal justice system. You don't want to appear in court 6 months down the line or 12 months down the line, as you know. When you do work, you might not go to court for a long time after that. And therefore, you want to be able to review your notes, your technical reports of what you did and how you did it. Because at the end of the day, you may be asked in court to redo what you've done like 6 months before, 12 months before. And by having all your notes in there, you can do that. Um, for the reports in Virtual DAB, I think you can view it in notepads. Yes, so you can get, and again, it's quite gibberish. It's a bit technical, but that will give you an indication. But also, you can load that back into Virtual DAB as a setting, and that will bring back all the filters and all the compression and output compression that you used. It will all come back, so you will be able to redo that if needed. And after that, so as you know, there might be the odd occasion where you are not able to transcode or or open a piece of CCTV proprietary footage because it will only be playable by the proprietary software that comes with it, and some manufacturers do this for a variety of reasons, marketing reasons. And they make it as difficult as possible for you to open their video files without their proprietary software. And some of these pieces of software might not have an export tool or may have an export tool which degrade the quality so much that you don't want to use it in any case, and therefore you might have to screen capture. Screen capture really should be the last resort. I discourage this for a number of reasons because you lose control of what you're doing. You may and probably will lose frames when you capture the footage because obviously the computer has got to play back the footage and at the same time it's got to record it into a viewable format. So if you have something playing back at 25 frames per second, for example, and then you want to capture that 25 frames per second, that's going to put a lot of strain on your machine, and the result of that is that if you can't cope, it will miss some frames here and then, and certainly, especially if you're doing analysis, that's a no-no. Also, you lose the raw properties of your footage, and therefore if you, for example, you're using a screen capture for analysis, then you will no longer know what is an iframe and what is a P frame, for example. And again, I'm not going to go too much into that. If you don't know what that means, I will do perhaps at a later stage in another video blog. But that is potentially all things that you are going to lose and you might need, and therefore it is very discouraged. I discourage it, but it might be necessary because you tried everything else and everything else didn't work. So for that, I use a tool called Virtual DAB. Called Snagit. It's made by a company called TechSmith. It's very inexpensive, and again, there are a few out there, and you can go whatever you like. So The way it works, it basically capture the outputs of your desktop or a region of the desktop, and you can tell the tool what region that is. So, for example, if I was to capture this little bit of footage here and resizing it like this is not something you want to do in real life because you are compromising the resolution of this file now. But this is just for demo purpose, if you like. So, and then you can indicate the software what region you want to capture. You can, I think, even tell it that you want to create your own region. Yes, so here, fix region, and then you can actually draw the region area of the that you want to capture. And some tools will snap automatically onto it. And then once you've done that, you can record it and have your screen capture ready to go. So we have come to the end of this video blog. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, I hope it give you some insight on how to do things, and how to get ready for accreditation, perhaps if you're at that stage. And please get back to me, get in touch, let me know what you think, let me know if you have ideas of how to do certain things better. I would very much to hear from you, and hopefully I'll be back with some more video blogs talking about some of the tools that we discussed today in a little bit more detail. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening and see you next.